Where are my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen souls? Where are my Raghunath Bhatt and Gopal Bhatta, and where is Krishna's Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all transcendental qualities? Being unable to attain the association of Lord Chaitanya's accompanied by all these devotees, in whose association he performed his pastime, Narottam Das simply weeps. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Saparandiyam Adadanaschanandantai Ridam Yache Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Padambujo Dulisyam Janma Janmani Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Vanchakalpadrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Sarupaya Rupanuga Parayate. So we're gathered here on this very most auspicious day of the disappearance of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Especially those of us not coming from Indian background, this is the most important event of our whole lives. Because it was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur who first began to preach in a language outside of the languages of India. He began to preach in English language. Even he wrote several books. He wrote almost 100 books in his lifetime, many of which were written in the English language. Because he had firm faith that Mahaprabhu had said, Pritiviti acharya nagarari gram sarvatra prachoy hoive modanam. He didn't say that just in Bengal or maybe in Orissa. He said Prithvi. And we know Mahaprabhu, he went to the whole of India in his Dakshin Bharat. He spread Krishna consciousness throughout the whole of India. But he gave the order, Prithvi. Prithvi means the entire earth. But people thought, how is it possible? Only it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur who had the deep vision to see beyond this gross bodily consciousness, to understand that the soul is eternal part and parcel of Krishna. No matter where someone has taken his birth, his original consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Only Bhaktivinoda Thakur had this deep vision. He had such a wonderful vision. He was such a broad-minded. Mahatma means broad-minded. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is so broad-minded. He has written in his books, he saw the precursor of the Sankirtan movement in the Salvation Army. This was the incredible vision of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. They were banging cymbals and chanting names of God. He saw this is the precursor, that soon the Sankirtan movement will go to the West. He was the enemy of sectarianism. He saw this as the beginning of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. And he predicted when that day will come when the Americans, Germans, Russians, he specifically mentioned, would join together with Kol and Mridanga and chant the holy names of Krishna. He also predicted that day is coming when these Americans, Germans, Russians will come to Sridham Mayapur and join with their Bengali brothers, embracing one another and chanting Jai Sachinandana, Jai Sachinandana, Jai Sachinandana. He also predicted that a huge temple would rise in Mayapur. And all three of these predictions have been fulfilled by none other than His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. But he had that deep vision. When people thought, well, maybe it's possible in Bengal, or maybe in Orissa, because Mahaprabhu spent much time in Orissa. In Bharat Barsh maybe, but not beyond the sea. Thakur did not agree. If Lord Chaitanya is Lord of all, then let all lands hear His call. This is from a poem I wrote. If Chaitanya is Lord of all, then let all lands hear His call. So it is only by the mercy of Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur that we're sitting here today in this holy dham of Sri Vrindavan on this Amavasya day, New Moon Day, and we're sitting in that beautiful Sri Sri Krishna Balaram temple constructed by Srila Prabhupada almost 40 years ago. This is all the unlimited mercy of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We can't even begin to imagine the work of the Thakur. He was a district magistrate. We can imagine how busy that was, but still he found time to pursue his spiritual life. He had 10 children. We can't even imagine. Nowadays they make this artificial propaganda. When I first came to India, they said R2, we two, R2. Now they say we two, R1. But Bhaktivinoda had 10 children. How busy he must have been taking care of 10 children. But still, we read his schedule, is almost unbelievable. I don't have a copy of his schedule here. Maybe it's written here somewhere. But incredible schedule. He would, every minute of the day. This is one of the qualities of a great Vaishnava mentioned in Nectar Devotion. He does not like to waste even a minute in Krishna's service. He had his whole day spread out, mapped out. Every second was devoted to the service of Srimad Mahaprabhu. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, he appeared in a very crucial period in Indian history. At that time the British were ruling, and they were trying to make they were succeeding in making the intellectual class of men think that their Vedic culture and their Vedas are inferior to the British culture and British literature. They were trying to make them, they used to ridicule the Vedic scriptures. What are these books that describe 30-foot kings and 30,000-year rules, and especially the character of Krishna they ridiculed as a debauchee. And unfortunately, the intellectual class of men, they took up this call. So this was a very crucial juncture when Bhaktivinoda Thakur appeared. And he performed the pastime of being apparently influenced. He was brought up in this Western type of education by all these different schools that we'll hear about later. It was only later in his life, and after a long search, it's described in his biography, it took him 8 years to find a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita in Calcutta, Bengal, the place of appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because there was a two-pronged crisis. Not only were the British ridiculing Vedic culture, but many pseudo-sects of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers had appeared who were making mockery of Vaishnavism. People had no respect for Vaishnavism. It's just a religion where you can engage in debauchery. Or it was just a religion where you can sing in the street and beg. It's just an excuse for begging. The important people of the leading people of the time, they had no respect for Vaishnavism. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur grew up in this atmosphere. But his whole life was changed. Actually, he was born in a place in Nadia called Bir Nagar, specifically one place called Ulagram. Very opulent circumstances. His father and grandfather were great aristocratic persons. Huge amount of wealth. He grew up in a very pampered way. But it was around, just shortly, he was married when he was 11 to a girl who was only 5 years old. Because this was not uncommon in Bengal at that time. The philosophy being that the children would thus be fixed. They didn't live together, of course. Because it described Bhaktivinoda's first child came when he was 22. But at least their minds were fixed and not flickering, looking here and there and going in the marketplace to trying to find a match. They were already fixed. Bhaktivinoda himself describes it as a doll marriage. We can just imagine a 5-year-old bride. Bhaktivinoda calls it a doll marriage. There was a pleasure boat, there was a big chariot, huge throne. He said it was almost like a doll marriage. Then in his 12th year, his father passed from this world, and then the family began to fall into all types of debt. Although being born in very opulent circumstances, they fell into very hard times. And they moved to various places. It was also in his 12th year, or maybe it was after, I can't remember just now, maybe it says here. After he completed his education, he must have been older then. He was requested to be present at the time of his paternal grandfather's death. His grandfather, Raj Ballavadatta, had been a famous personality of Calcutta and retired to a lonely place in Orissa, Choti Mangalpur. Has now become very famous because our Fakir Mohan was able to trace out the original deity of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Radha Madhav. And we're very fortunate many times during Kartik, Radha Madhav come and stay with Radha Shyam Sundar. He knew the future and he could divine that time of his death. So we called Bhaktivinoda Thakur there. Bhaktivinoda found that he was very healthy. He could not understand why he's saying he's going to leave. But Bhaktivinoda told him, you stay here for 2 or 3 days. On the 3rd day he called Bhaktivinoda. He told him, after I leave, because on the 3rd day he came down with this fever, just slight fever, not even a heavy fever, slight fever. He was lying in his bed, he called Bhaktivinoda. He said, after I leave, don't stay here for many days. He said, whatever occupation you attain at the age of 27, that will be your life's work. And that you will become very great Vaishnava. I give you all my blessings. And with that he breathed his last, and pop, the soul passed through a hole in the top of his head. Very rare death. He was a great mystic. Then Bhaktivinoda, shortly after, about when he was 20 years old or so, 22 I think, he got a job in the educational service as a teacher. But everyone loved him, even his British superiors were very impressed by him. They gave him letters of recommendation, and eventually at the age of 27 he became a deputy magistrate, just as his grandfather had predicted. And from then he was transferred to many different places. And it was at this time that he would manage to get a copy of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Reading the first time, he was very impressed. Reading it second time, he became convinced of the divine nature of Sriman Mahaprabhu. But he was totally bewildered. This Sriman Mahaprabhu was worshipping this Debachi Krishna. He felt that Krishna was a very questionable character. How is it that this divine personality is recommending and himself personally worshipping Krishna? So he began to pray to the Lord for many days to reveal the answer. And finally the Lord gave him the divine intelligence to understand the deep meaning of Braj Leela. As people held Braj Leela and Krishna Leela in very low esteem. But he understood that underneath all this misunderstanding, there's a very deep divine philosophy establishing Krishna as supreme over all. So then he also studied Srimad Bhagavatam. One town he gave an historic speech on the Srimad Bhagavatam, which attracted the attention of thousands. Later it was compiled into a book. I've just forgotten the name. He made the world know what hidden treasures pervade every page of the Bhagavatam, which should be read by all persons who have a philosophical turn of mind. Finally he was posted in Puri. And at that time there was many irregularities in the service of the Lord, but it was very difficult. Even now we see daily there's big tussle going on between the government and the Daitapatis. They don't want people climbing on the carts. Yesterday, 2 days ago, they refused to perform the rites. They boycotted the special rites where they're supposed to give report to the king about the health of Lord Jagannath, because now he's sick after his Abhishek on the 13th. So unruly type of people to manage. But Bhaktivinoda was so expert that he was able to get all of the irregularities removed and brought everything down to nice, perfect timing and regulation. And he checked many malpractices that were going on. At that time, Jai Sisi Gornitai Sisi Krishna Ballao Sisi Radha Shamsundar. There was many impostors who were posing themselves as incarnations of God. The most famous of them was one Bishikena. He was telling that he was the incarnation of Lord Vishnu, and he was going to drive the British from India. He would rise up with an army and drive the British from India. So he got many followers. And the British, always worried about an uprising, they became very disturbed by this fellow. And they knew Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a very deep personality, very capable to get to the bottom of these things without causing a disturbance. Bhaktivinoda, of course, his mind was that this fellow is blaspheming our religion by claiming to be an incarnation of God. No one can simply spuriously claim. All the avatars are described with their symptoms in the scripture. It came to pass that this Bhisikena even claimed himself to be Lord Krishna, and he began to perform Ras Leela with many respectable persons' wives. That's the complaint came to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur came there to his forest hideout. He was lecturing before thousands of people. But still, Bhisikena, by his mystic power, he noticed the presence of Bhakti. Bhaktivinoda was in civil dress. Said, Babu, I know why you have come. He stopped his lecture. Better you return. But Bhaktivinoda sat down, listened to his lecture. After the lecture, he chastised him for trying to represent himself as God and for trying to create a disturbance. And he asked the soldiers to arrest him. Then immediately sparks, he had big jata on top of his head. We say dreadlocks, we call jata. Sparks began to fly, the soldiers were frightened. Bhaktivinoda himself grabbed the scoundrel and placed him in jail. But that scoundrel declared that, Thakur, you will see, for this offense all your family will die. And so it came to pass that one of Bhaktivinoda's relatives, one of his family members, got a very deep fever. While the trial was going on, every day the trial was going on. Every day Bhisikena warned him. On the final day, even Bhaktivinoda, he became afflicted by a severe fever, practically unable to move or walk. Everyone was sitting in the court waiting for the Thakur to appear. The court time was about 10 o'clock in the morning, but Thakur unable to get out of his bed. Suddenly, exactly at 10 o'clock, the door of the court flew open. Bhaktivinoda strode into the courtroom. He sat on the chair. He pronounced the verdict that this guy was convicted, guilty of treason and so many other things. And all the followers began to make a huge hue and cry, but Bhaktivinoda was unswerved. Again there was a display of sparks and things like this, but Bhaktivinoda was undeterred. And one of the British officers there, when the police grabbed this Bhisikena, he took some scissors and chopped off his hair. He'd read in some book that somehow the yogis keep their Shakti, their power in their hair. And the Bhisikena fell to the ground completely without any energy. And he was placed in jail. Still Bhaktivinoda, even his own family turned against him. Please, you release him, otherwise we're all going to die. Just see your daughter, she's got such a fever, she's going to leave her body. But Bhaktivinoda was unswerved. This fellow was blaspheming, claiming to be an incarnation of the Lord. And having lost all his power, finally he died in the jail, and the fever in Bhaktivinoda's family was gone. This way many other impostors came, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur dealt with them all the same way. While he stayed at Puri, then Bhaktivinoda used to engage in all types of discussion of spiritual works. And thus he began his preaching work. He began writing many books. And he had been, originally he took Diksha from Bipin Bihari Goswami, but having met Jagannath Das Babaji, he became influenced by the purity and faith of Jagannath Das Babaji. He considered him his master. So then he was trying in so many ways to get transferred to Navadvip. He wanted to pursue his studies of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. they were finally not accepting his transfer, so finally he resigned. So then they transferred him to Navadvip, where he established a beautiful house in Godrum called Swananda Sukhada Kunj, from which place he saw a divine city rising out of the paddy fields. Those who've been to Mayapur in the old days, you know, before everybody started building leaning apartment buildings, it was all beautiful paddy field, just as far as I could see. But Bhaktivinoda saw a divine city and a divine temple rising from that paddy field, looking across the Jalangi. And his pen, day and night, was writing so many books, even books in English, especially one very significant book, Lord Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. He wrote in English. And that book, Prabhupada found it very spiritually significant that book reached McGill University in Canada in the year of 1896, Prabhupada's birth year. So Prabhupada took that as a very great prediction. Then he met many famous personalities. There was one Bankim Chandra who wrote some manuscripts that was filled with all types of Western style speculations. Bhaktivinoda criticized his text. He became friends, so he was able to criticize the text, and Bankim Chandra had, according to Bhaktivinoda's vision, he had the whole text revised. And thus he established Srimad Bhagavatam as the most spotless scripture, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most munificent avatar. And Bhaktivinoda was preaching day and night. One time we skipped one thing. While he was at Puri, seeing the degraded condition, he was feeling helpless in his war to set Vaishnavism straight and to show the glory to the Indian people of their own culture, which was being criticized and made fun of by the British. He felt himself totally incapable alone to do this. He prayed to the Lord for a ray of Vishnu. And thus was born Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, at that time was known as Bimal Prasad. And just to confirm the spiritual stature of his child, shortly after his birth was Rath Yatra. And the cart, if anybody's been to Puri, you know, right on the Grand Road was Bhaktivinoda, the magistrate's house was right there on the Grand Road. So the Rath Yatra cart had to pass right in front of Bhaktivinoda's house. It stopped in front of his residence. And his second wife, because the first wife had died very shortly, very short life, and then he married Bhagavati Devi. So Bhagavati Devi ran and took advantage of her stature as being the wife of the magistrate. She climbed on the cart and placed the child at the feet of Lord Jagannath, and Lord Jagannath's garland fell down on top of that child. Not only that, when the child was born, his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck just like a Brahman thread. So many auspicious symptoms there. But when Bhaktivinoda saw the garland, when his wife placed the child on the cart, the garland fell from on top of the child. He took that as a sign that this is a very special soul who's come in answer to my prayers. Later, Srila son and father became an incredible preaching pair. As we know that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was super intelligent and super educated. So he was able to defeat, both father and son preaching together, able to defeat so many bogus philosophies at that time. Especially we missed one there at that time, being influenced by the Western ideas. There was one Ram Mohan, who started this Brahmo Samaj, which was a kitchery of Eastern and Western ideas, but it captured the minds of the youth and intellectuals of Calcutta that day. And Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta both preached very vigorously to show the useless speculations and deviations of his philosophy. Although the whole of Calcutta was in awe of Ram Mohan and his Brahmo Samaj. So while he was staying at Navadvip, he began to search for the birthplace of Sriman Mahaprabhu. Even today, if you cross the Ganga and go to the now city of Navadvip, you will find there a birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Bhaktivinoda's studies show that Mahaprabhu had been born on the opposite bank of the Ganga. And the city of Navadvip at that time was hardly a 100-year-old city. So now maybe 250 years. And everybody said, no, the real place was washed under the sand, the changing course of the Ganga is not to be found. That this is the real place in Navadvip. But he said, no, it is on the opposite side, all the scriptures. He researched and found out old maps. We can't imagine the type of research. Those days you didn't just log on to Google and find out something. Very difficult to search out maps and books and things like this. Even took him 8 years to find a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bengal. So he saw on all the old maps a place called Mayapur on the opposite bank of the Ganga. In fact, there was a big tank there called Balal Dighi, because it was dug out by Balal Sen, who was ruling at the time. And just near, everyone knew that near Balal Sen's place was the house of the Qazi. So if Mahaprabhu's birthplace and Srivasanga and all these places were on the opposite side of the river, how is it this chanting disturbed the Qazi? Because not far, they've actually found the ruins of the Qazi's house. It's not far from the Yogapith or Srivasangam. So then, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he found there was a few very ancient self-realized souls who were worshipping this place as the appearance place of Sriman Mahaprabhu. But he wanted confirmation. So he went to his guru, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji. That time he was well over 100 years old. He could hardly walk. He had one servant who used to carry him on a basket. Even though he couldn't walk, whenever there was kirtan, they would open up the basket, he would jump from the basket and dance in the kirtan. And as soon as kirtan stopped, he would collapse. They had to put him back in the basket. So described that Bhaktivinoda brought him to that place. There was a small hill where only tulsi growed. Even it was owned by a Muslim family. And even they were frustrated because they couldn't get any rice or anything to grow in that place. Only tulsi grew in that place, nothing else. As soon as they set the basket down, and that time Jagannath Das Babaji, his eyelids were always drooping. He had to pull his eyelids like this. As soon as he saw that place, he leapt 3 meters into the sky. He couldn't walk, but he leapt 3 meters into the sky. Haribo! 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 And therefore we always chant, Gora Vibhava Bhumistan, Nirdesha Sajana Priya. That appearance place, Nirdeshta, he was the one who showed, who confirmed the place, Stan, where Srimad Mahaprabhu appeared. And he presented so much evidence. If you ever go to Yoga Peeth, you'll notice on the opposite side of the road, there's a post office there. And the name of that post office is Sri Mayapur Post Office. Because Bhaktivinoda had such evidence, such sterling evidence, that even the British had to accept that that was Mayapur, and they gave that post office, just ordinary post office, but it's very significant that Bhaktivinoda's evidence was so strong, even the British accepted his evidence and established Sri Mayapur Post Office there in that place. Of course, by this time he had retired from government service, and he was determined to build a Gaur Vishnu Priya temple on this spot. And he began begging. And he even came in the Amrita Patrika Bazaar, the Kedarnath Datta, that was his previous name, is going from door to door, begging every Hindu gentleman a contribution for the Gaur Vishnu Priya temple to be established at the real place of Mahaprabhu's birth. And we pray that no one refuse him a rupee. At that time rupee was a lot of money. Bhaktivinoda's first, I was just reading, Bhaktivinoda, when he became a teacher, he was getting 150 rupees a month. So 1 rupee was a lot of money in those days. 150 rupees, not even one day's expenses these days. You can't even get through the day. So gradually he established a beautiful temple there, Yoga Peeth, and established the worship of Gaur Vishnu Priya. And when they broke the ground, then they found the original shalagram of Jagannath Mishra. Beautiful shalagram was there. So he established to all honest persons the real place of Srimad Mahaprabhu's appearance. Then he established many Sajjana Tosani and many other works, magazine Sajjana Tosani, and he began writing many, many books. His pen was unceasingly writing. And the more the names of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna were preached, the merrier the Thakur became. Then he wrote so many books, we don't have time to go into all the books of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We can read some of them here. He made annotations of Sri Brahma Samhita and also annotations to Sri Krishna Karnamrita of Bilva Mangala Thakur. Then he wrote immortal precious works like Sri Harinam Chintamani, glorifying the holy name, and Bhajan Rahasya, where he describes all the elements of bhajan. He also edited with commentary Srimad Bhagavat Artika Marchi Mala, which contains all the most prominent slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam pertaining to the Vaishnava philosophy. Finally, in the beginning of the 20th century, he built a house on the beachfront in Puri. Just if anybody's been to Puri, if you know where Haridas Thakur's Samadhi, it's just, there's an intersection there, on the opposite corner from the Samadhi is Bhakti Kutir. Unfortunately, that original building they broke down to make a restaurant, but anyway, the place is still there. And we have our ISKCON temple there. So he stayed there in Puri. Many honest souls sought his blessings and readily obtained them. Then finally he accepted the renounced order of life by taking Babaji from Gaurkishore Das Babaji in 1908. Though he was leading the life of a renounced soul, he could not avoid the men of all description who constantly visited. All of them received oceans of spiritual training, instructions, and blessings. In 1910, he shut himself up and remained in perfect state of samadhi, or full concentration on the eternal pastimes of the Lord. In 1914, he passed on to the blissful realm of Goloka, on the day which is observed as the disappearance day of Gadadhar, Sri Gadadhar. Here we quote a stanza written about the Samadhi of Haridas Thakur, which Srila Bhaktivinoda wrote sometime in 1871 to explain what influence a Vaishnava carries in this world even after his departure. He reasons ill who tells that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy name around. Then Bhaktivinoda Thakur's final prediction was that soon there will appear a personality who will preach the gospel of Mahaprabhu all over the world. So we know that personality was the disciple of the son of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, our own A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The desire was there of Mahaprabhu, the will of Bhaktivinoda was there, the preaching of Bhaktisiddhanta was there, and Srila Prabhupada is the fruit of all of that. He spread this Krishna consciousness and the ideals of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He lifted the Vaishnava theology had been trampled into the mud. No one had any respect for either Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhagavatam, but Bhaktivinoda showed the intellectual class of people the beauty, the rare jewels that are found in the Bhagavatam and the rare jewels of the divine Vaishnava philosophy, and the rare jewel that is Braj Leela. We're all sitting here in Vrindavan because we're enamored by this Braj Leela. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the one who showed the pristine purity of Krishna's pastimes. It is not some ordinary dealings. He raised them out of the mud of speculation and deviation, and established on very solid ground the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya and the six Goswamis. He especially had one place in Calcutta called Bhakti Bhavan, where he preached very vigorously along with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I believe that place is still there, Bhakti Bhavan. Not very far from Prabhupada's birthplace. So we're very fortunate that Bhaktivinoda Thakur took up this great task. At that time when the Thakur appeared, the Gaudiya Vaishnava world was in turmoil, was sinking, no one had any respect. British ideas were ruling. Everyone wanted to become an English babu. But Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur fought against the current and changed the whole current of thought. And now we see all over the world people turning to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy, finding divine happiness. As the whole world is plunged in a whirlpool of materialism, heading to hell, everyone is becoming frustrated. Their lives are empty. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the beacon light. He set up the beacon light to guide us back to our real spiritual function as the eternal servants. Jivera Swarupoi Nitya Krishna Das. Our eternal function is the eternal service of Sri Krishna. And only in that position will we become happy. Only in that position will we become satisfied. Otherwise, this sense gratification only leads to frustration. So we all have Bhaktivinoda Thakur for turning the tide. We all have to thank him unlimitedly. This is a very wonderful day to remember and hear about Srila Bhaktivinoda and all of his wonderful work that he did. Anybody else like to say anything in glorification? You want to say a few words about Bhaktivinoda? Anybody has any questions? So then today at 12:45, after the darshan is closed, we'll all return here, have some nice bhajans, and we'll perform Puspanjali and Artik, and then there'll be a wonderful feast at 2 o'clock in honor of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur not only wrote so many books, we've been talking about the books, but he wrote so many bhajans also. And not only in Bengali, he wrote many bhajans in English also. Beautiful poetry in English. I can remember in school, sometimes we had to write poetry in our own language, and that was always a big headache. What to speak of write poetry in another language? But Bhaktivinoda wrote such literature, such poetry in English with perfect rhyme and meter, and so beautiful. Just like there's one song, Sahagrahi Vaishnav. Vaishnav who's always taking the essence, Saragrahi. Only taking the essence, Saragrahi Vaishnav. Alas for those who spend their days in festive mirth and joy, the deadly deads in liquid farms their heart fair employ. The shining bottles charm their eyes and draw their heart's embrace. The slaves of wine can never rise from what we call disgrace. Just listen to the meter, the rhyme, everything perfect in a different language than his own mother tongue. Was man intended to be a brood and work and heart? Should man, the Lord of all alone, from common sense depart? Man's glory lies in common sense, dictating as the grace that man was made to live and love this beauteous heaven's embrace. O love, thy power and spell benign, now melt my soul to God. How can my earthly words describe this feeling soft and broad? Man's life to him a problem dark, a screen both left and right. No soul hath come to tell us what exists beyond our sight. But then alas, within ourselves this tiny voice is felt. Man, man, thou art immortal soul, thee death can never melt. My God who gave us life alone, alone the soul can kill, or give it all the joys above, his promise to fulfill. While then this childish play in that which cannot be our own, which falls within 100 years as if a rose ablown. Our life is but a rosy hue to go along ere to naught. The soul alone would last forever with good or evil fraught. Then he has one line that is all of Prabhupada's preaching. 2 little stanzas. But tell me not in reasoning cold that man was made alone, by earth's mechanic lifeless rules and to destruction prone. The whole world is reeling under the influence of this mechanistic science. Everything can be explained by science, mechanism, just all of impersonal mechanism. But tell me not in reasoning cold, the soul was made alone, by earth's mechanic lifeless rules and to destruction prone. My God who gave us life and all, the soul alone the soul can kill, or give it all the joys above his promise to fulfill. What does that want to...